Years ago, when Kelvin was a pipeman, his crew was sent to the Dover neighborhood to repair a water main break that was located in an alley between two rows of houses. It was Christmas Eve. The crew was scheduled to work a half day from 6 a.m. to noon, so they hoped to get the job done quickly. There was snow on the ground. The temperature was minus 20. The first thing they had to do was cut down through 5 feet of frost, and then it's ground frozen to the consistency of concrete. Dig down through another 4 feet of dirt to get to the pipe. They put a cage down in the hole to protect Kelvin as he worked. Now at the bottom of the hole, it's warmer than on top, and with water dripping from the pipe and hitting that clay and turning into a muck, if your feet get stuck in that muck and the walls start to collapse or water starts filling up, that's a problem. One time, Kelvin's feet were so stuck that the crew had to literally pull him out of his rubber boots. To stay loose, Kelvin uses what they call a surfboard. It's a 2x10 plank of wood that's about this long to stand on. He found the leak, cleaned off the pipe, and wrapped a clamp around it. And you can imagine a metal Band-Aid. He tightened it and called for the water to be turned on. Now at this point, he's standing next to a pipe that disappears into a dirt wall. When water pressure returned to the pipe, water started flowing from the dirt wall underneath the pipe. A second leak had started flowing. Kelvin said it was due to what they call a water hammer, and that's when water literally hammers against the side of the pipe. This pipe was made of ductile iron, and when it corrodes, it rusts out holes as big as your fist. By now, it was 1 p.m., an hour passed when the crew hoped to be done. If you're going to repair water and sewer pipes for the city, you're going to want some equipment. You'll need signs to block off the street, a backhoe to dig a hole in the ground, trucks to haul the material away. A cage goes down in the hole to protect the worker. The shack is critical to the whole situation, and I heard some crew members refer to it as their home away from home. And you can imagine an office lounge meets a kitchen. And they go in there to have lunch, take a break from the weather, and get away from the public. More on that later. You'll also want some extra pipe. You'll need some clamps. Now, these are the metal Band-Aids I was talking about. Gravel, and of course, your hand tools. Every morning, Jane wakes up to check the weather. Is it going to rain or snow? Does she need her rubber boots or her regular ones? In the summer, it's 28 degrees out. Wind still, not a leaf moving in the trees. You're standing out there, an expanse of black asphalt, all around you, machinery humming, everything throwing off heat. Meanwhile, you're wearing these heavy coveralls on top of your shorts and a t-shirt, and then you got the hard hat, and you're in a residential neighborhood. And all around you, you see people in their air-conditioned homes or parked in front of a fan. One of those residents walks right up to you and says, "Hey, when's the water coming back on? I want to cool off." And they're just wearing tank tops and flip-flops. In the winter, Aldrino said, ice builds up in your helmet. Hands stiffen. The insides of your nostrils freeze. Jane's toes turn purple. The steam from her breath drifts up to her eyelashes and freezes. Blink too long, she worries her lids will stick together. There's what Kelvin calls a slurpy head. West wind blows across the water. You get out of your truck, you face that wind, your forehead freezes. Some mornings, the crews get up before the sun rises to the cold, and then midday, a Chinook rolls in, everything warms up, and before you know it, winter is back. Jeff was down in a hole. He was repairing a water main break. The temperature was 30 below. He called for the water to be turned off, and the laborer turned the valve the wrong direction. As Jeff said, a tidal wave of water soaked me to the bone. He finished the job, climbed out of the hole, and walked the 100 meters back to the shack. By the time he got to the shack steps, he couldn't lift up his leg because his overalls were frozen solid. So instead, he threw his body through the doorway, wriggled himself inside, and then lay there on the floor, waiting to melt. Jane sees the guys carrying around what they call City of Calgary luggage. It's a large garbage bag filled with clothing for any situation. Tibor said, "When it's cold, stay outside as much as possible. Worst thing is to go in and out of the shack." Kelvin, you have to learn to relax when you're outside. You have to learn to relax and let the blood flow. Tense up and you get cold. On the coldest days, Charmaine wears fleece-lined pants, a long john top. On top of that, she puts a thick parka that makes her feel like she's wearing an astronaut suit. Her boots are rated at -40, and in each boot she puts toe warmers, one below and one above each foot. At the end of the day, she is so cold, she goes home and takes a shower and then lies down sandwiched between 2 electric blankets. After 2 hours, she says, "I'm back to normal." I just talked about Jane about spending 12 hours out in the cold. And I said, you know what, on the weekend, it must be a relief to go home and turn up that thermostat. And she said, on her day off, she likes to go ice fishing. And she wasn't alone. I mean, there are plenty of other crew members who will spend their time in places colder than Calgary when they have a chance. They go hunting, snowshoeing, camping. There was one crew member, Ronnie, who said sometimes when it was cold, he liked to stay at home. I said, well, what did you do there? He said, I hang out in the garage with all the doors open. I was trying to understand this attraction to the cold. And then Kelvin explained his theory to me. He said there are inside people and outside people. Kelvin is outside, his wife inside. So they go to a restaurant, he wants to be on the deck. She gravitates indoors. On vacation, he's going in the ocean. She's staying by the pool. And the rental car, he wants a convertible. She doesn't. Kelvin was talking about work, and he said, we're at the training facility, and this woman was trying to teach us first aid. Everybody was antsy, moving around, going to the bathroom, getting coffee. Finally, she stopped everybody at a break, and she opened all the windows and the doors. It was kind of cool out. She realized she was losing everyone because we were like trapped animals inside that room. Kelvin then explained that the room temperature dropped. The trainer put on a coat because now it was cold in there. Meanwhile, 25 crew members could finally relax and focus on the training because they were back in their element. Dennis was telling me about the old days in construction, back when they used fewer machines and more muscle. You hauled buckets of dirt, dug with a shovel. In my time, he said, the foreman kicked your ass and you went to work. And if you had a problem with someone on the crew, after your shift, you go behind J building to settle it. Now, Dennis's desk, where we were talking, was located right next to the entrance of construction services. So every time someone came through the door, he'd introduce me to them. He said, this is Stokely. That's what he called me. He's an artist, you know. He's going to paint a picture of us. And he laughed. I was just telling him about the old days. You remember, behind J building? To clarify, I said, you mean you go back there to fight? I could imagine two workers butting heads, words are exchanged, they promise to meet up later. But after 12 hours of physical labor, you end up here in a parking lot? Is the fight still in you? Dennis said, When you're called out to fight, you go. You know what it's like. And gave me that man-to-man, we're in this together look. My plan was to spend 6 weeks with Dennis and the other crew members who repair the water and sewer pipes for the city. I'd visit in the summer and then come again in the winter, but now I wasn't sure I was going to make it. When I hear the word fight, I run. In need of some advice, I went to talk to Jane, and she said, this is a man's world, like a manly man's world. And you got to wear your big girl pants every day when you're here. And she explained he can't take offense to what the guys say. We rib each other all the time. And we wait until we feel that sore spot, and then we just hit it every single time. And here's what she did when she said that. Every single time. And you can't let them know your weaknesses. And if they say something that bugs you, you got to pretend like you don't care. Because if they know it bugs you, that's going to stick for like 3 years and everyone's going to know about it. She put it this way. It's kind of like a really mean hug. I love you, but we're going to mean hug this out. You're not going to like it at all, and I'm not going to stop. Now, the best way, she said, to avoid the hug is you leave your emotions in your lunchbox. And this was advice I heard from others. Colleen said, you can't be a wallflower. They will chew you up, eat you up, and spit you out. Kelvin, if people aren't making fun of you, they don't like you. Now, near the end of our counseling session, Jane was talking about her supervisor, Kim, and how he started as a laborer and he worked his way up. And for Kim, there are no dumb questions. You can ask him anything. In fact, you put in a good day's work, he's got your back 100%. And Kim, he may be the captain of the ship, but if that ship is sinking, he will stand right by your side. Listening to the admiration in her voice, I started to tear up. I said, I think I'm going to cry. Jane said, leave your emotions in your lunchbox. We went through this. On Christmas Eve, the foreman called more trucks to the job site. Now, up until now, they've been using 2 trucks to haul the material the 12 miles back to the yard. More trucks meant they could dig more quickly, get the job done sooner. To find that second leak, they needed to extend the length of the trench, dig down through the frost and dirt, move the cage over. Now, water is dripping from the pipe into the hole. A pump then sucks it out. Today, the hole would be relatively dry, but back then, the pumps were not effective, and the hole was filling faster than it emptied. Eventually, Kelvin found himself working on a submerged piece of pipe, and the water temperature was hovering right around freezing. He said one time he was working with his bare hands in cold water, and he reached up to grab the ladder, and his hands froze to the metal. They started to burn, and he wanted to pull them away, but he knew he'd tear the skin from his palms. So instead, he waited for them to warm up and thaw before he released them. Kelvin found the second leak, put a clamp around it. Now, for this next part, he had to take off his gloves because he needed his fine motor skills. He took a nut and a bolt, put his hands under water to thread them together to hold the clamp in place. I spent many days driving around with Dennis, and he would take me to the job sites where his crews worked and introduce me to everyone. He said, this is Stokely. He's a storyteller. He's going to make a puppet show. He laughed. Driving around with Dennis, I learned about his family. His daughter was getting married in the fall, how he spent his free time, playing golf with his buddies, but they had a rule on the fairway, no discussions of work. His favorite meal, spaghetti, which his wife would only make on rainy days. So sometimes when he's driving around and he saw a cloud in the sky, he'd call her up and say, I think it's going to rain. and then cross his fingers. When I'm driving around in Seattle at home, I avoid construction sites. They're noisy, chaotic, they cause traffic and slow me down. But here, it's just the opposite. I mean, with Dennis, as soon as he was done showing me one job site, I couldn't wait to get to the next. And all the parks and shops and scenery, it was just stuff getting in the way of the next hole. One day when Jane was 5, her mother dressed her up in a nice white satin dress, fixed her hair for church, and told her to wait outside with her 2 older brothers. And the 2 older brothers, well, they did what they were told. But Jane immediately went off to play, and that dress quickly went from white to black. She craved adventure. If you told her at that time she could walk ahead 2 blocks, she'd go 3 and see if you're looking and could go further. When the family first moved to Calgary and went shopping at the mall, her father kept her on a leash. Now, people at the mall, they were horrified. They said, "This is your daughter. She's not a dog." And Dad said he would release her, but they'd have to help find her because she was going to run away. The moment he undid that leash, she was gone. As the family called her name throughout the mall, Jane was hiding beneath a rack of clothing. She said it was so much fun. There's a picture of Jane when she's 3 years old. On one side of the image, her brothers are playing in the water. On the other side of the picture, Jane is tied to a tree. Her father built a fence around the backyard, and he put the crossboards on the outside of the fence so she'd have nothing to grab onto if she tried to climb out. And then he watched her on the swing set, pumping back and forth and back and throwing her body bang up against the fence and sliding down. She stood up, looked around to see if anyone was watching, and then tried it again. As Jane said, "I just wanted out." Her mother is putting together a scrapbook, and she's noticed there are 2 kinds of pictures. In one pile, there's Jane in a nice little dress, her hair is perfect, miserable and crying. In the other pile, there's Jane covered in dirt or chocolate on her face, the happiest little clam. Not long ago, she was down in a hole, standing up to her knees in water, shoveling dirt and chasing a leak. She found the problem in the pipe, but the moment she did, the side of the hole collapsed. Dirt hit the water, causing it to splash all over her. The foreman standing at the top of the hole, looking down, said all he could see of Jane's face was her white teeth smiling. Kim said, "In my day, you learned how to read the ditch. You watch and learn. You just watch the ditch." And I was really happy to hear this because now it's not just a hole in the ground. It's something we can actually read. And here's how he explained it. Today, you want to put in a new piece of water pipe. So you're going to dig a narrow trench like this. Whereas in the old days, the hole looked like this. It had a slope to it, and then it turned into a smaller box where the pipe went. Well, you fast forward 75 years, and you want to repair this piece of water pipe. Couple things you should know. One is virgin soil, and that soil that hasn't been dug up is always denser than fill, even fill that's been there for 75 years. And 2, fill is generally going to be of a different color, even just a slightly different color, because it usually comes from some other place. So when Kim's trying to locate the pipe, he digs down to where the 2 soils meet. He then follows the slope to the pipe. Dave, when I see dirt, I want to know where it's been. We might be digging a hole that used to be a toxic site, garbage dump, near a gas station. People see dirt, but what I see is the possibility of not living the rest of my life with my kids. John, the power dirt has when it wants to move. A cubic meter of it's like 1.5 tons or more, and that could just snap the wooden cage protecting the worker down in the hole. When Frank's down in a hole and he's looking at the dirt wall through the slats in the cage, and he sees a crack in the wall, he'll put a pebble in the crack and then pay attention to it over time. If the pebble starts to move, he knows the crack is growing wider and that wall is coming down. When digging around virgin soil, Dave wondered who walked on this dirt in the past. Mike was what you call a working foreman. So one day, 40 years ago, instead of standing around giving orders, he dropped down into the hole. Today, the job would be done differently. The hole wouldn't be as deep, the materials for the cage would be stronger, and they'd pay closer attention to the soil. This hole was dug on a slope, and on one side of the hole, it was virgin soil, and the other side is fill, which you remember is looser. Now, the night before, it had rained, and that fill soaked up the water like a sponge. John, who told me the story, was getting ready to haul a truckload of dirt away, and someone yelled, "The hole collapsed." John jumped out of the truck, ran over to the hole. All he could see was dirt. He yelled, "Mike," and a hidden voice said, "I'm here." At that moment, Mike stood on a ladder, and there was 3 to 4 feet of dirt above his head, and it was pressing down on him such that even if he could breathe down there, the pressure would soon collapse his rib cage, making it impossible to inhale. Up top, the laborer went into shock, started running around. John told him, "Get me a shovel." The backhoe operator started digging, and John told him to stop, because if the bucket hit Mike, it would tear him apart. John climbed down into the hole and dug in the direction of Mike's voice. And as he was digging, he hit Mike in the head and said, "I'm sorry." Mike said, "Forget I'm sorry, keep digging." He cleared the dirt off of Mike's face and then started to pull it off of his chest so he could breathe. On Christmas Eve, after tightening the clamp, Kelvin called for the water to be turned on. A third leak started flowing. You have to imagine, throughout this neighborhood, there are families in their homes feeling the relief of water flowing into their kitchen sinks, only to have it shut off again. The second time the water went on and off, a man emerged from the house across from the job site. He said, "In 2 hours, I have 30 friends and family arriving. I have $300 of food to cook, and I need water." It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The crew had been working for 10 hours. Kelvin knew that his wife had supper on the table. The foreman had family waiting for him at home. So the question was, what do they do? Jane played premier soccer as a kid, and when she was on the sidelines, it was loud. The coach, players, parents, everyone yelling, and then you have games on nearby fields and whistles blowing. But the moment she stepped onto that field, it all went quiet. She was so focused on playing the game that she couldn't even hear her father, who was yelling at her from just 3 feet away. Same thing at the job site. Up top, it's chaotic. Heavy machinery moving around, people getting tools, cleaning up, and then beyond the orange cones, there's honking horns and traffic. But the moment she climbs down into that hole, she said, "Everything goes quiet for me. It's very calming in a creepy, I'm in a hole kind of way. I get in the ditch, and everything else goes quiet, and nothing else matters to me, and I don't hear the cars go by. There's something calming about it, right? Like I said, in a kind of creepy, this is like a grave kind of way." After hearing Jane talk about holes, I couldn't look at them the same way. This hole to me is now warm and inviting, cold and prickly. That is the creepiest hole I saw in the city. After interviewing a range of workers, I made a list of questions that I wanted to ask everyone. And one day I sat down with Dennis to ask him the questions. And he said, so how's the puppet show going? I said, it's going great. I just need you to write some songs for it. He laughed, and I asked him about his experience working in a hole. Did he have any thoughts about dirt? What techniques did he use for digging with a shovel? Dennis gave me a long look and said, have you ever done any physical labor? Have you worked with your hands? Have you ever used a shovel? I just want to know who I'm talking to. I immediately realized two things. One, he thinks I'm an idiot. Two, he's right. I haven't ever worked with my hands. I mean, the closest I get to physical labor is watching the crews. When I was first invited to Calgary, they told me that if I want to go to the job sites, I'd need to wear steel-toed boots. And I was thrilled because now I could buy my own work boots. And you add to that the reflective vest and the hard hat. I mean, now I was getting somewhere. Jane said the first time she saw me, she was down in a hole and I was looking over the edge. She said what went through her head was, oh, great, another white hat here to tell me what I'm doing wrong. And I was like, white hat? And she said, it was brand new. And you could still see the creases on my vest when it had come out of the packaging. Jane saw right through me. Talking about working in a hole, Kelvin said, you're always kind of edgy at first. You have to get past that because you have a job to do. Finally, you get relaxed enough so you can look at the situation and you know what? This is a good ditch. I'm comfortable with it. Put the ladder down there. Obey. The less time you spend down there, the better. Kelvin, repairing old water pipes, you see something no one has seen in 80 years. Dave, my favorite is probably working in an old residential neighborhood that's got lots of trees and hearing the birds or the complete silence of a snowy day. When there's such thick snow around the top of the ditch that you can't hear traffic, you can't hear machines, you can't even hear the men walking around the ditch because it absorbs the sound and you're just left in this moment to complete the job. Dennis, we bury all our successes and our mistakes. In the winter, 7 or 10 crew members will pile into a shack to have lunch. 4 or 5 of them will sit on a bench along the wall, a narrow table in front of them. A crew member leans against the stove, another against a sink. Someone sits on a garbage can by the door. The foreman parked at a desk in the corner. Jane said, everyone breathing, it smells like the hole. It smells like dirt. It smells like our sweat. Jane said, working in such close proximity with other crew members, you get to know them. The deodorant they use, the shampoo, the smell of lunch on their breath. One crew member smells like fresh laundry. Another like they haven't bathed in a week. Jane said, you get used to people's smells, perhaps in the same way they've gotten used to me. There was a water main break at the corner of 9th Avenue and 15th Street Southeast. And so they had to dig up the street and they couldn't really find the problem right away. So the hole just got bigger and bigger. Marissa is an engineer and she made this drawing and explained to me that this piece of pipe went in the ground in 1972. Now this piece went in the ground in 1968, 62, 59, 57, 56, 1930, and 1910. Now here is the job site after the work was completed. So this spot has been dug up at least 10 times in the last 100 years, and it is just one of countless intersections in the city of Calgary. Tibor said, I say I'm in the quilt business. I do patches. I put patches everywhere in the city. Ron, I love what I do, and I think we build and create a lot of artwork, and we bury it so people have no idea what is underground. What if the city made their patches out of plexiglass? That way, as we walked around, we could look down and see the world beneath our feet. Cliff explained that every day the backhoe operator digs a hole so the pipe man can go to work. He said it's a very different kind of office space. Kelvin, we stand out in the middle of traffic on both sides, and we feel comfortable. For us, that's the office, vehicles racing by. Jane, the city of Calgary is our office. I work as a college librarian, and when I'm in my office, I rarely hear my neighbors on either side. The phone might ring once a month. If I close my door, I can work for an hour or more in silence and no one is going to bother me. What if my office was more like theirs and I had to pay constant attention to the walls? Is that a crack? Is it bigger than it was a moment ago? And then from above, my colleagues are always heckling me, telling me to pick up the pace, get the job done. And the public, they barge in at random moments, yelling at me, questioning my work. I say to them, do you have any idea what I'm doing? No, they say, but I'll tell you this, you're doing it all wrong. And if the crews are working downtown, not only will people yell at them, but they will also throw things at them from the apartment buildings. Some of the things that have been thrown: cigarette butts, bottled water, empty beer bottles, salt and pepper shakers, glasses, kitchen chairs. Dave said a lamp actually landed a couple of feet away from one of the guys I was working with. When I asked Dennis about things thrown at him, he said eggs, cans of soup. No one was ever hit by a can, but Dennis said, I have seen the cans explode beside us. There was a water main break between the LRT train station and the Sandman Hotel. And the city didn't want the repair done during the day because it would disrupt commuter traffic. So they sent Kim's crew to do the job at night. Now, when Kim arrived, he went into the hotel to explain to them what was going on. And he learned that they were having a convention of geologists. Now, at 11 o'clock at night, when the job started, none of the geologists or other guests seemed to notice. But by 1, 2 in the morning, when the bars had closed and people make their way back up to their rooms, and they hear the beeping trucks and the jackhammering, that's when they started yelling. Now, Kenny, he was a pipe man on the job. And at one point, he glanced up at the hotel and yelled, "Watch out!" Everyone scattered. Because here comes a couch flying through the air. Standing in the alley on Christmas Eve, the foreman called the crew together to make a plan. Everyone agreed to give it one more try. So once again, they had to extend the length of the trench, dig down through the frost and dirt, move the cage over. Once again, Kelvin, with his fingers and toes freezing, dropped down into the hole. He found the problem in the pipe, wrapped a clamp around it, tightened it, called for the water to be turned on. It worked. Finally, after 12 hours, Kelvin was looking forward to going home. But they weren't quite done yet. First, they had to put gravel underneath the pipe to support it, fill the hole with dirt to insulate the job overnight, and then put a fence around the whole situation. As the crew was sweeping up and getting ready to go, the garage door across from the job site started to open. Now, this is the same house where that man is cooking a meal for 30 guests. Kelvin watched the garage door slowly open. Inside, he saw 2 folding tables. On one table were cups and drinks. On the other table, 2 plates of sandwiches. The man of the house appeared, gave a wave of thank you, and went back to his guests. Kelvin and the crew members approached the tables, poured themselves drinks, and ate the sandwiches. It was near the end of my visit, and I went into construction services. And around the corner, I could hear Dennis talking. I couldn't see him, but I heard him say, "You haven't met Stokely? The tall guy? He's the artist, the one making the puppet show." And I waited for him to laugh, but he didn't. It didn't sound like he was telling a joke. No, it sounded more like he was stating a fact. And that's when I realized people are going to actually think I'm making a puppet show. I needed to do something about this right now. Dennis said, "I'm the guy that cleans up. I can't stand a mess." If he and his wife are having a dinner party, after the guests have gone home, he sends her off to bed and he cleans the kitchen up, gets everything back to normal for the next day. Same thing at the job site. You would never see Dennis's tools looking like this. No, they're always leaning against a barricade or in a nice row on the side of the road. And he always has someone sweeping as they go, keeping things tidy. Well, one day he was at a job site and he looked over at the pipe man, that guy, and sees him doing this. Dennis is beside himself. He goes over to the pipe man and says, "What are you doing?" And the pipe man says, "You don't get it. People will drive around the barricades, up on the lawn. They'll even drive through the worker. But hey," he said, imitating a driver, "I'm not going over that pickaxe because it might hurt my car." After that day, Dennis said, I didn't pick up anything for the rest of my career. Thank you very much. Thank you.